At IdahoSports.com, we've got you covered 6 ways from Sunday when it comes to high school sports. But what about BSU, ISU, U of I, C of I, CSI?
I think the big headlines, because a lot of people talk about Boise State, but it's the quarterback battle. And what's your take, Lucas, on that quarterback battle?
I think it's, what do you want? Do you want the floor or the ceiling?
Have no fear, the Fighting Taters are here.
The thing I love about the Cody Hawkins hire is that he's an Idaho guy. He's a Bishop Kelly graduate. Dad coached at Boise State. So I think this is one of the first hires ISU has had in a long time, where he can go into these recruiting situations and say, I am Idaho, I get Idaho, come play for Idaho State.
Each week, Ryan Luke and Lucas Gebhardt will break down the biggest stories at the next level and beyond.
With Coach Eck getting that extension, it's a huge get. That's a huge get for University of Idaho. I mean, we've seen what he can do.
It's the Fighting Taters Show on IdahoSports.com.
That's right. It is the Fighting Taters Show here on IdahoSports.com, episode 11 for Ryan and I. He's Ryan Luke. My name is Lucas Gebhardt. As I said, we are the Fighting Taters Show. Remember, you can watch this show on IdahoSports.com YouTube channel, Facebook page, and X account. You can also listen to the show on IdahoSports.com or wherever you download and subscribe to your podcast. So definitely go ahead, smash that like button, subscribe, leave your comments, do all the following. Helps us get some more people out there and grow the podcast. Ryan, fun show we had last week. We had Brandon Huffman on. You guys go back and listen to that if you want. Brandon Huffman, 24/7 Sports National Recruiting Editor. We dove into a lot of stuff. Idaho's recent recruiting classes, talked a lot of Coastal Loveland, a lot of Gatlin Bear. But today, as Boise State going to UNLV, playing UNLV tonight down in Las Vegas, biggest game of the year for Boise State thus far this year. We're going to talk about what needs to happen for Boise State to get anything but a 12 seed in the upcoming college football playoff. Job number one, they got to win tonight at UNLV, which is not an easy task. UNLV just outside the top 25. They got to go on the road. Probably got to beat UNLV twice to even make it to the CFP. Challenge one is tonight.
Yeah, challenge one is tonight, and we predicted it all along. The problem is during the course of a football season that we've had up until now, we've seen some ebbs and flows, some highs and some lows. I would argue Boise State started off lower than I thought they were when they played the first game, Georgia Southern. Ashton Jeanty put himself on the front stage there. He just absolutely blew up. But that said, that defense was a little soft in areas. We are seeing Georgia Southern as a quality football team. So I don't think I don't think it's an indictment as much as it is the progress that we've seen in the Boise State defense and specifically the adjustments that they're making. Now, flip the other side of the coin. We have UNLV. UNLV went through this NIL debacle, a quarterback, they had a running back, a linebacker's talking crap. I mean, it goes on and on. In spite of all of that, I think the ceiling's higher with the current quarterback. But that being said, I don't think they're as good a team as they were prior to the debacle. So the path has, over the course of the season, and we've seen this unfold, the path has gotten easier for Boise State to run the table, go 11-1, potentially 12-1 with the championship, and pick up that seed because they will end up as a top group of 5 seed after that. But the path has certainly gotten a lot easier as UNLV, again, continues to kind of settle in to what we thought they were. Not as good. I don't think they're as competitive, but they are certainly a good football team.
Yeah, without a doubt. And, you talk about the NIL debacle in the UNLV. The backup's a stud, too. I don't know if you see it in play, but Boise State, I think, going to have their hands full here tonight. But as long as Jeanty keeps rushing for 200 yards a game, I think they're going to be all right. So a couple other games to keep an eye on as we head into the weekend. Michigan State will be an interesting one for those that follow Idaho high school football. It's going to be a Rakeem Johnson, Colston Loveland both playing in that game. And then for the Boise State fan as well, as we talk about and start looking at some of the group of 5 teams, Notre Dame and Navy going to be one to watch as well. Notre Dame ranked 12th in the country, Navy ranked 24th. So that'll be one to watch as Army and Navy both kind of nipping at the heels of Boise State for that group of 5 spot. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the rankings. Again, the point of today's show and what we really want to take a deep dive into is I feel like everyone just thinks Boise State makes this CFP, they're going to be the 12th seed. Maybe, maybe not. I'm going to make a case here as we go out through the next 20 minutes or so that I don't think it's that crazy to think that they could jump out of that 12 seed. Maybe even a first round bye could be on the table if things go the right way. So that's just a thing. A lot of things got to go right. So,
enlighten me. Why do you feel like that could happen? Because
sure.
I completely disagree, but go.
Yeah. Well, let's just we'll set the stage here. And right now for our listening audience, we just threw up a graphic which has the right now we're projecting what the CFP would look like based off the latest AP media poll. So what we did is we took the top 4 ranked current conference leaders that we're going to assume are conference champions. If you ever go to IdahoSports.com and you look at Brackets Baney, the thing that Brandon Baney, our content editor, does leading into the Idaho high school football season, we're doing that, but for the CFP. So Oregon is the top-ranked team in the country, leading the Big Ten. They would be your number 1 seed. That is followed by Georgia, who's ranked number 2, Miami, who is leading the ACC, Iowa State, who is leading the Big 12. Those would be your first-round buys, seeded 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then we rank the rest of it, obviously, with the at-large bids, and then our next conference champion that is the highest-ranked team, which right now is Boise State. As of right now, according to the AP media poll, Boise State would be ranked 12th. Now, this is where it gets interesting because 5 through 8, these are teams that would host playoff games at home in the first round. You have Penn State, Ohio State, Texas, Tennessee. That is your 5 through 8, and that is according to where they are ranked in the AP media poll. Then you have these 4 teams going on the road to play in their first round games, which would be LSU, Clemson, BYU, and of course, Boise State. By the way, kind of interesting to look at who wouldn't have made this field. First 4 out: Notre Dame, Indiana, Texas A&M, Alabama. Those are your first 4 out. Indiana, by the way, just absolutely red hot. So, and has got one of the best up-and-coming coaches in college football. Texas A&M, another team that's hot as well. So those are 2 teams that are just kind of nipping right outside the edge. Alabama with the 2 losses. Their Vanderbilt loss all of a sudden doesn't look quite as bad with them cracking the top 25 either.
Yeah. So notable on that, obviously, is Alabama. I think we've seen some – so we're talking the first 4 out. Then we'll roll back into the seedings where we see them right now. So Alabama, the first one that sticks out in my mind. Notre Dame, again, Notre Dame's always going to be flashy. Is never going to be flashy. They're always going to hang out there because they play a strong schedule. Whether they win big or they lose big, it seems like they always lose really big games, big-time games. They ended up losing a game that Northern Illinois. They shouldn't have lost that game, and that's probably going to be the nail in the coffin for Notre Dame, if I'm being honest. The other problem they run into is with Notre Dame, they don't play a conference championship game, so they don't have that extra game to kind of put them in there or get the automatic bid. They always have to be, if they're ranked in 1 through 10. Is it 1 through 10? If they're ranked 1 through 10, they get an automatic bid to go play in the college football playoff, as is they're outside of that 1 through 10 right now as it currently stands. Texas A&M's good. Problem is you have to run the rest of the gauntlet of the SEC. I'm telling you, Indiana is unbelievably hot. I mean, you saw what they did in Nebraska. I mean, it was ugly. And Dylan Raiola, legit quarterback. I've seen him do some amazing things on the football field. True freshman for Nebraska. Matt Rule really, really helping that program to turn it around. Give him 2 more years, and that's a perennial top 25 team and going to be pushing in the Big Ten at a certain level. But all those, I could see Indiana. The problem is you have to go in, you have to play some other really big teams, and so I can see them getting played out. But if we're looking now, rolling back into who is in at this point, Iowa State and BYU, let's look at those 2 teams from the Big 12. Currently, BYU has a better in conference record. So instead of the seeding, that's just based off the AP media poll. The seeding right now, BYU would capture that. CBS Sports has them picked to win the Big 12 if that's the case, and they go in and arguably would pick up that number 4 seed. Again, I'm fine with that. I'm going to be honest, as a BYU fan, but I don't know. I don't know if I buy it. I really don't know if I buy it. And the reason I bring this up is because this is very beneficial to Boise State. If BYU slots out, say they fall further down and they end up, BYU could theoretically lose a Big 12 championship game to Iowa State. They would then be the 12 seed, which would bump up Boise State. But I just don't see Boise State cracking that top tier. I still think they have to play an away game. I think that's just the way the big boys align it. There's just not enough quality wins on the schedule. Ashton Genty is going to make a case, and it's his Heisman Trophy to lose. That said, I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, no, and this is kind of how the projections, again, for a listening audience, we'll run through this. This is how the first round projections are kind of lining up. And the interesting thing, you brought it up with Notre Dame. The interesting thing about Notre Dame, remember the top 4 seeds, which is the crux of this whole argument. The top 4 seeds, those 4 first-round buys, are reserved for the top 4 conference champions. It does not necessarily have to be from a Power 4 conference. Everyone's assuming that it will be from a Power 4 conference. But where we're going with this right now is, does Boise State have a case? Do they have a better resume than a BYU? Do they have a better resume than an Iowa State? I don't think they have a better resume than whoever comes out of the ACC. But as you look at this right now, the first round matchups, your 5-12 would be Penn State and Boise State. So Boise State right now, according to the AP media poll, would go to Penn State for the first round game. You have 2 SEC teams in that 8-9 matchup, LSU and Tennessee. BYU would go to Ohio State. Clemson would go to Texas. Now that sets up the quarterfinals as Oregon gets the 8-9 winner. That's going to be Tennessee and LSU. Georgia would get the winner of Clemson and Texas. Miami would get the winner of Ohio State and BYU. And then at Boise State, if they would somehow get past Penn State, they would get Iowa State in the quarterfinals. Probably the best matchup out of the four.
Yes. Totally agree. And or flip BYU and Iowa State, right? And we talked about what a regional rivalry that would be. Boise State at BYU. I mean, we're going to see all kinds of different blue all over the board. And continue. But I think the other half of that too is what we got to talk about is there you are.
Sorry, my dog wanted out of the room. He was locked in.
Yeah, there it is. No, but I think that's an incredible. But either way you look at it, say Boise State goes in and takes care of business versus Penn State. Again, tough matchup. James Franklin, really strong program there at Penn State. A team, and heck, they may end up being the Big Ten champion, right? And then you get a cascade backward. Realistically, you could have another Oregon Boise State game if they just inverse those two. Not to be outdone is Ohio State. So a lot of football to be played. A lot of conference champions to be determined at this point.
Yeah, it's just interesting that I was kind of going through and digging into this. That we talked last week with Brandon. Could they slide up to an 11? Could they slide up to a 10? I like 12. I like 12. I'd like to play Iowa State at a neutral site game much more than an Oregon, a Texas, a Georgia. You know what I mean? So it's just kind of interesting how that plays its way out. And so this is just another interesting thing that I just want to kind of point out as well. So this is how the AP media poll compares to where the teams rank in the college football playoff. And this is why I think the super conferences are just brilliant and is awesome for college football. Anyone that says the Texas-Georgia game last week didn't mean anything has no idea what they're talking about, because Georgia, who won that game, now goes in, has a first-round bye, does not have to play a game. Meanwhile, Texas has slid all the way from 1 to 5. Texas is 2 slots away from having to go on the road in the first round to play a LSU, to play a Tennessee, to play a Clemson. They're 2 spots away from that. but because they lost at home to Georgia, the heat's on for Texas now. Texas has got to win some games in order to not only get back up into that top echelon, those top 4 seeds, but also to avoid playing on the road in the first round. So just kind of interesting how this sets up here, Ryan. Oregon, obviously, you have 1 and 2. They're solidified. The winner of the Big Ten in the SEC, that's going to be 1-2. Gets interesting at 3 because Penn State is the 3rd-ranked team in the country, but right now it's the 5 seed. Ohio State, 4th-ranked team in the country, the 6th seed. We just talked about Texas. Miami, 6th-ranked team in the country, but they get 3. Go all the way down to Iowa State, ranked 10th. They're the 4 seed in this projected playoff. BYU, the 11th-ranked team in the country, they're the 11th seed. And then there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 teams ranked ahead of Boise State in the AP poll right now that would be out of the college football playoff before you hit Boise State. So the argument of, well, could Boise get a home playoff game? They have to jump theoretically probably to get all the way up to LSU. You're talking they got to jump several teams, 5 of which aren't even in the playoff right now.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of the rest of the season. And, you know, back in the day when they did when you just had the BCS, and I mean, it was so long ago, right? But when you had the BCS, the way that they talked about it was every week was a playoff game. Specifically, if you're in the ACC or SEC. Well, back then, ACC, because you had Clemson playing at that level, which, by the way, I think Clemson wins out. I think Dabo Swinney has turned a switch on that. I think they win out. So Miami and Clemson will theoretically match up in the ACC championship game. I think the loser, I don't know if the loser falls far enough to get out. I still think the ACC probably gets 2 teams in. Don't love it because I don't really care for the ACC. I don't think it's a very good brand of football right now. But I do think that Clemson is going strong. But anyway, I digress. The BCS, back in the day, it was win every single weekend. And that's exactly what's got to happen here if you even want to get in right now. So think about it. Oregon has to continue winning all the way through. If they lose, and let's say they lose the conference championship, the Big Ten conference championship, to say Penn State, Ohio State. They've already beat Ohio State, but say it's Penn State. Oregon still is in. Oregon's still in. But you drop down now, you're a 6-7 seed. Like it changes. So you're not going to have 2 Big Ten teams in the top 4. It's just, or you have 3 Big Ten teams in the top 4. Just not going to happen because somebody's not going to qualify. So these seeds, these are all going to mix up. So I think the bigger question needs to be, who are the picks for the top 4? Who's going to win out? And then after that, who stays in? Now, the rest of the order, I think we can argue back and forth. But my question to you is, Lucas, who are the top 4 teams or who are the conference champions? Your thoughts?
Yeah, it really helps Boise State if Oregon wins the Big Ten. That being said, I just have a feeling that they're not going to get it done in the Big Ten championship. I think they win out the rest of the way, but it's tough to beat a team twice. Let's say they get Ohio State in the Big Ten championship. Tough to beat a team twice, especially when it was that close. So if they get Ohio State again, I do like Ohio State in that rematch. Another team I really like this year that not a lot of people are talking about in the national landscape is Penn State. Penn State has always had a great defense. They've had some issues on offense, particularly at quarterback the last few years. They've kind of figured it out this year. I think there's some people sleeping on Penn State. That Ohio State-Penn State game will always say we'll say a lot. Penn State really hasn't played anyone yet, so I could be eating my words here in a few weeks when Ohio State, remember, goes to Penn State. And that's probably a must-win game for Ohio State because look at where they're at right now, ranked 4th in the AP poll, but 6th in the CFP rankings. Ohio State that fan base does not want to play on the road in the first round. That fan base expects to get a bye.
Right, and take it a step further. You lose 2 games in the Big Ten, and you're not playing in the Big Ten championship. You're just not. I mean, realistically, Penn State. So I have Penn State's schedule here. The only big game they've won is at home versus Illinois. They won 21-7. They beat at USC 33-30, and that was in overtime. USC lost that game.
Tough travel game, though, all the way across the country.
All across the country. But USC lost it. Penn State didn't win it. But this week on Saturday is Ohio State. Mm-hmm. So they have Ohio State this weekend. That is a must-win game. Now, say they win it, say Ohio State wins and Penn State loses, then you're going to have these two one-loss teams that are going to have to be determined by some kind of statistical mathematic on the back end to see who ends up playing Oregon in the championship game. But all that being said, if Ohio State loses, Ohio State's out of the playoffs.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm saying is Ohio State. I mean, if you're not in the Big Ten championship, that's really got to hurt. Ohio State still has to play Michigan as well. So I know Michigan's down a little bit this year, but still, it's a rivalry, but and that might be Michigan's Super Bowl for this year. Michigan's like teetering on the edge of even maybe going to win the game right now.
Yeah.
So that could be their championship game.
Well, the reason I think Ohio State has this is because Harbaugh's not the coach, and he's Ohio State's kryptonite. So if that's the case, then – but all that being said, I think what that does, though, is that does loosen up another slot for a team because you can't have a two-loss team that didn't play in their conference championship. You can't put them in. It doesn't make sense to put them in the playoffs. You can't. There are too many good one-loss teams. And Indiana, right?
Indiana's a wild card, man. I think Notre Dame potentially is too. If Notre Dame runs the table, which they could get a ranked win over Navy this week, Notre Dame can't be one of the 4 teams because they're not in a conference. The highest seed Notre Dame can get is 5.
Well, that depends. No, if they're ranked number 1, they would pull the number 1 seed. So if they're in their top 4, they get their ranking wherever they are in the top.
I know that their president or whatever was like part of the rule making committee of this thing, so that wouldn't surprise me. But
yeah, but hold on. Let's back up. Let's talk about. So if Indiana runs it, and plays in the conference championship, let's say they lose in the conference championship. Indiana's in. Penn State out. Ohio State out. Penn State would only have 1 loss. Penn State's still a wild card. You can still throw them in there. They may get the 3 teams, but I do see Indiana jumping up at the expense of Ohio State.
Yeah, here's kind of the bottom line here for Boise State. When you look at, and we'll go back to these first round projections and kind of where the seeding is at. When you look at who is 5, 6, and 7, 5 and 6 is going to be your SEC runner-up and your Big Ten runner-up. That's you're probably, and you said you like Clemson this year, so Clemson's probably going to slide up to 7 or 8. So let's say you have SEC runner-up, Big Ten runner-up at 5 and 6, and Clemson or Miami at 7. That leaves 1 spot to have a home game. Can they get up to 8? Can they beat out the 3rd team out of the Big Ten? Can they have a better resume than the 3rd team out of the SEC? My answer is no right now.
Yeah.
Or I'd agree. But here's where I'm going with this. Do they have a better resume than whoever wins the Big 12? And I think that is a much more compelling argument for Boise State because look at this is the Big 12 standings right now. BYU, Iowa State, both 7-0, tied for first. Kansas State, and then you have a logjam at second. You have Kansas State, Cincinnati, Colorado, and Texas Tech. Kansas State at 6-1. Cincinnati, Colorado, Texas Tech are all at 5-2, including Arizona State, but they have 2 conference losses. Big 12 is a hot mess right now. Could be a hot mess, especially if BYU and Iowa State lose. Those are your top 2 teams. That's who's projected to win the Big 12. You just said that CBS was projecting BYU to win the Big 12. You're the BYU guy. Do you think they can win the Big 12?
Listen, you made the great comment. You said the Big 12 is a hot mess, and it is. When Utah and Cam Rising went out and decided that as an 8th-year senior, he was not going to play for the rest of the season again, that ruined everything for the Big 12 because they had served on a platter. They had this University of Utah football team that had come off 2 Rose Bowl appearances, and they were supposed to run roughshod. That defense under Whittingham has always been very solid. But as is, they have 3 losses and they look bad. So all of a sudden it opens up. Now, Iowa State was predicted to be good. Campbell is a great coach, and he's done some really great things. BYU has come out of nowhere, and they've done it via defense, and they've done it via, it's weird. I mean, Jake Retzlaff has barely over a 50% completion percentage. I think he's hovering right closer to 59%. But whatever it is, makes big plays, and they win football games. is that sustainable for the rest of the season? And as a BYU guy and all the insiders and everybody I talked to, we're kind of like, wait, are we good? I can't tell if we're good yet.
Yeah.
The flip side is
barely escaped Oklahoma State last week.
Now,
Barely.
Oklahoma State, you got to understand, Oklahoma State is a sleeping giant. Ollie Gordon III is a phenomenal back. He's still first-round talent that's going to drop. I think Mike Gundy, I think that team has underachieved so far. But that said, I mean, they pushed BYU. It took, with 1:10 left, they drove down the field and they scored the touchdown.
Yeah,
so, again, is that sustainable? I don't think so. What I was going to say, though, the flip side is, let's say BYU goes and they lose one game but still make it to the Big 12 championship game. Yeah. They end up playing, say, Iowa State again. They lose 2. They're done. A 2-loss team from the Big 12 is done. You can't put a 2-loss team from the Big 12. Even if they did play in the championship, you can't put them in. So that helps Boise State to climb up even higher.
Right. And here is the crux of I think a home game in Boise, I just don't see happening. I just think there's too many other at-large bids that the committee is going to rank higher. Now, remember, whoever gets that 4 seed is a conference champion, right? What if Colorado wins the Big 12? Right. And so that's kind of where we're going with this. Does Boise State have a better, like, who on this list right now, which we have the current resumes, we put up key wins, which are just wins against ranked teams. What losses do they have? What teams are still on their schedule? That's what's up on our screen right now. BYU ranked 11th by the College Football Committee, 7-0. They do have a win against 13th ranked Kansas State. They're 7-0. They don't have a loss. They still have to go to UCF at Utah. So going to Salt Lake in the Holy War, they still got Kansas. They got to go to Arizona State and play Houston. So there are 2 losses on that schedule. Remember, and we have the Big 12 championship game.
And the Big 12 championship. Of all those teams on there, what frightens me the most is Utah. I mean, everybody gets up for rivalry. Ohio State, Michigan. What are some other? UCLA, USC. Right, that's not a very good one. Notre Dame, USC. That's a better one. You know, some of these rival, Cal, Stanford, Utah, BYU. That one does scare me because it is at Salt Lake City. But the way that the Big 12 is played out, I don't see anybody being dominant. I just don't. I really don't see anybody being dominant. I think the most explosive team in the Big 12 is probably Kansas State. And unfortunately, Iowa State has to go to no, I guess they have Kansas State at home. So that one could tell us a lot too. That could tell us a lot.
Yeah. So the other one that we have is Iowa State. Iowa State, I think, has the strongest resume out of any of these teams, especially if they beat Kansas State at the end of the year. Right now, they're ranked 10th in the AP poll. This is a top 10 team of Iowa State, right? Boise State needs Iowa State to beat Kansas State because, like you said, Kansas State probably the most explosive team in the Big 12. If Kansas State doesn't make the Big 12 championship, they're probably not an at-large team, and they obviously can't win the Big 12 if they're not in the Big 12 championship. So a 2-loss Kansas State team probably helps Boise State. Now, remember, I talked about Colorado earlier, right? They played earlier in the year. That's Colorado's only loss is Kansas State, right? And so you look at – yeah, go ahead.
Well, you're saying in the Big 12 or you're saying in general?
In the Big 12. Only lost in the Big 12. They have a loss at Nebraska as well. So is there a way that, let's say, Iowa State at 1 loss, losing to Kansas State, could lose a Big 12 championship game? Or is it because BYU, Iowa State, Boise State's locked in at the 12? My point is, if one of these 2-loss teams can get into the Big 12 championship and win the Big 12, I think the door opens for Boise State to potentially have a first-round bye. And I don't think it's that crazy of a scenario. Some things got to break their way, but they got to have one of these 2-loss teams somehow break through. And it probably happens by BYU losing at Arizona State, let's say. Iowa State loses against Kansas State. Kansas State loses at Houston. I don't know. Crazy things happen in the Big 12, right? Point being that we said the Big 12 is a hot mess. If the Big 12 cannibalizes itself and there is a team that would not get an at-large bid otherwise, and the Big 12 sort of becomes a one-bid league, and that one bid goes to their conference champion, then Boise State, which you see their resume at the bottom, would have a win against Washington State. If they win out, they would have probably 2 wins against UNLV. And I think they have a better resume than a 2-loss Big 12 team.
Yeah. What the problem that we're going to run into is this. What if you have a 1-loss team, Penn State, that doesn't make it to their conference championship? Are they still good enough to make it in? BYU, say they get to the conference championship and lose the conference championship, and it's a good game, it's a close game. Is the resume good enough to still, and say Colorado gets to that and wins it, right? All of a sudden, BYU.
I think Colorado is the best 2-loss team in the Big 12 right now. I think Colorado has the best chance. The problem is they've already lost to Kansas State.
Yeah, and so the moral of the story is if one of these no-loss teams gets into this, so BYU or Iowa State gets in the conference championship, they lose, do they have a good enough resume to do it? If they do, that's a 12 seed, in my opinion. Tops, that's a 12 seed. I mean, you played in your conference championship, you showed up well, and then you get like a Colorado that comes in and sneaks its way into, say, a 4 seed, and they've lost to Nebraska, the Kansas State. But all that being said, yeah, there is a way for Boise State to start climbing and maybe leapfrog a couple of teams.
Yeah. Another interesting one to look at here is Cincinnati, which still has to go to Colorado and still has to play Iowa State and Kansas State.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. They're done.
Yeah. They got to go on the road for both of them, but you never know.
Yeah, well, I mean, the easiest schedule all the way out here is BYU. They actually have the easiest schedule.
But I just don't – they don't feel like a 12-0 team to me.
Yeah. I mean – yeah, yes, I would love to say no, but it's just not happening. But they do have the easiest. So at UCF, they are underdogs. I think the spread on is 1.5 at this point. We'll see what UCF
1.5. Yeah. I guess it's on the road, but still.
Yeah, we'll see what kind of team shows up. At Utah, that's a tough one. At Arizona State looked really good, then they looked really bad. And then Houston, you never know. And who did they just beat? They just beat somebody last week.
Houston?
It was like, yeah. They won last week and blew my mind. I was like, what just happened here?
Yeah, Houston, let's see. Houston hasn't won very many games this year, but let's see what they have won. I keep getting ads popping up. Hold on.
Oh, they beat TCU is who it was.
There you go.
Yeah, TCU. Beat TCU, but then they just lost at Kansas 42-14. So, again, Houston, anyway, so BYU's schedule as it plays out is probably the most favorable. Any team that has to play Kansas State, I feel bad for them because BYU woke a sleeping giant. And I think Kansas State could be a buzzsaw. Avery Johnson, the quarterback, incredibly dynamic. They compare him to Lamar Jackson in terms of speed, escapability. So,
yeah,
we'll see.
Yeah, and that Colorado-Kansas State game was last week, 2 weeks ago maybe, but back and forth game. Colorado had a chance to win that game. And
they did, yeah.
That would have really helped Boise State if they won. I think it's not a very good one, as we pointed out, but I think it's more likely that Boise State gets a first-round bye than it is that they host a playoff game in Boise.
I agree. Yeah, because then they'd have to slot up. At the end of the day, I mean, look, the show is going to be about Boise State. We're talking about Idaho sports.
Mm-hmm.
They're in. I just don't see a way that if they win, there's nobody's going to leapfrog them. The Army-Navy thing, fun story. It's a great story to have.
Fun story, not a better resume, though.
Yeah, there's no resume, and they're playing in a conference that has been degraded a little bit after some of the defections, but it's still a good conference. It's the number 2 Group of 5 conference behind the Mountain West, and the Mountain West is soon to be the new Pac-12, Pac-8 for a while. But all that being said, Boise State's in. It's just a matter of where they go. Got to take care of business though versus UNLV.
Yeah, Boise State. Bottom line, they control their own destiny. That's the bottom line. They got to win tonight. at UNLV. That's by far the toughest game that they have left. And then after that, you see it at the bottom of the screen here. You got home games against San Diego State, a home game against Nevada as well. You got to go to Laramie, which at the start of the year, remember I was like, I don't know about that one. Laramie in November, but Wyoming shouldn't be a problem right now with the way Wyoming is this year. And you got a Black Friday game against Oregon State. All winnable games.
It'll be tough. Yeah.
Yeah. All winnable games, but clearly the one that we're most worried about here is tonight at UNLV. And then maybe again, first week of December in the Mountain West Championship. But they win tonight, that game would be in Boise.
Yeah. Yep.
So, all right. Well, there you have it. So, bottom line, Boise State probably had for a 12 seed, but you never know. Crazy things happen in college football. Crazy things probably going to happen in the Big 12. But right now, Boise State's slated for that 12 spot. Again, got to win tonight at UNLV. If they don't, then that totally shakes things up for them. And then moving forward, root for the Big 12 to cannibalize itself. Do that. Maybe we could get a first round bye. Who knows?
Yeah, I think SEC is a 4-team league. Depending on how it shakes out, Big 12 could have 2 to 3, not going to get 4.
ACC one. I mean, going back to your question earlier, who were the top 4? I'll give it to Oregon for now, but I just Penn State, man. I don't know. Maybe Ohio State will go kick the tart out of them today. Who knows? But I said at the start of the year I did like Oregon to win the Big Ten, so I'll stick with it. I'll go Oregon, Big Ten. SEC, I think Georgia's clearly the best team in the SEC this year. I don't think it's close, actually. I do like Miami in the ACC, and then I like Iowa State to win the Big 12. Or I don't think Kansas State's a foregone conclusion as well to win the Big 12. Like you said, most explosive team in the Big 12.
Yeah, most explosive and somewhat of a buzzsaw right now. Big 10, just because I believe that it's a top-heavy team, a top-heavy conference. Look, Indiana would be fun, but I just don't think that they can cut it versus one of these top-tier teams. That said, they dismantled Nebraska, but I'm still probably going to lean Oregon at this point. If they do play Ohio State, I'm going to give it to Ohio State. If they play them again.
I agree. Yeah, I think Penn State beats Ohio State, though.
And that's it. That seals the deal for Ohio State. They're done.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with Clemson because I do think Clemson is a more complete team than Miami. Miami's looked a little vulnerable as of recently, and Clemson has just gotten better. The big thing you got to understand with Clemson is they don't touch the transfer portal. They didn't touch it. They didn't go to rebuild it. Yeah, they'll take a transfer, but not necessarily building through the transfer portal. I think it took them a game or two to kind of get warmed up. Some of the young guys, get them reps. And then jumping over to the Big 12, boy, I would love to say BYU. So I'm going to say BYU just because I don't want to jinx them. But I think that there's a really good chance that Kansas State comes back through. And if Kansas State plays BYU again, I think, say for the Big 12 championship, I think it would be a very fun matchup. But who knows? And who am I missing? ACC, SEC.
Big 12.
Big 12.
You said Big 12.
BYU.
Big 10, SEC, BYU. Big 12, ACC. You got them.
Yeah, I got them. All right. There we go.
Yeah. One team in the SEC that, we kind of talked about them a little bit, but to keep an eye on that's playing their best ball of the year right now is Texas A&M. And we're just the one. I mean, it feels like, I think it was a week 0 game. Week 0 feels like forever ago. That's the only game Texas A&M has lost all year. But they got a tough one this week. But they get LSU at home. So they do have LSU this week, but they get them at home. And then it's at South Carolina. South Carolina is better than people think, too.
They are.
But
absolutely.
At South Carolina, that'll be a tough game. New Mexico State Cupcake at Auburn. That's winnable. And then they host Texas at the end of the year. Those two programs hate each other. And Texas A&M has been playing little brother to Texas for a generation. Wouldn't they love to spoil Texas this season at home?
Yeah, I lived in Dallas for 3 years, and it was fun. I'd always joke around and be like, hook 'em Aggies. People are like, what are you talking about? I said, I'm kidding. I have no dog in that fight, just wondering where you are. And the A&Ms inevitably were just like, no, we hate Texas, right? The Longhorns were like, huh, who? Texas A&M? Is that a school? Like, does that exist? So the bit of arrogance with the Texas fans, the Texas program, it would be fun to do that. Talk about cannibalizing, right? If Texas beats Texas A&M, no chance. Going to Tennessee, that's a team we didn't talk about. Tennessee, only one loss, but guess what? I mean, they just came off a huge win versus Alabama, but guess what? They have to go play at Georgia. So a 2-loss Tennessee team's out, meaning there is a lot of football to be played, a lot of football. So some of these in-between teams, LSU's, Tennessee's, there we go. Texas.
This is totally going to change in 2 weeks. And the first CFP rankings come out first week of November, which is next week, right? 2 weeks. So in 2 weeks, the first CFP rankings will come out. Then we'll really get a good picture at this. Probably going to look totally different because a lot of those 5 through 11 teams still have to play each other.
They do. Yep.
So be fun. It'll be fun to see how it all plays out, but we'll see how it all does play out. And we'll be talking about all of it here on the Fighting Taters show. This was fun. I'm glad we did this. So until next week, what do you think? Boise State at UNLV here tonight. What do you think?
Boise State's got to buy at least 2 touchdowns.
2 touchdowns. Okay.
2 touchdowns.
Yeah, I think Boise State wins, but it's close for a while, I think. So we'll see how it all plays out. But until next week, we'll see you next Friday. He's Ryan Luke. My name is Lucas Gephardt. Go Broncos at UNLV tonight.